Part 66. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 651. The King of Mandrills Must Die. After Park Young-myung expressed his feeling that his brother must die, the pandas Ying and Lele also waved their fists and made the loudest sound of anger. Mandrills are the largest primates in the world and one of the smartest primates. They have green skin, bright red ridges, and a big red face like a female lead in Peking opera. The special pattern of bright colors makes them look like ghosts at first glance, so they are called mandrills. As primates, mandrills are similar to baboons and gorillas in appearance, except for a big painted face, and their fighting ability is even better than these two. They are also more irritable. Monkeys, gorillas, and baboons have an irritable side, but more often, it is more appropriate to describe them as naughty. But mandrills are fierce and aggressive, almost cruel. If the gorilla and baboon are naughty children who love to make trouble and grow up to be street thugs, then the mandrill is a serious member of a criminal gang, cold-blooded and cruel. The most direct proof is that adult mandrills are brave and warlike, with long and sharp teeth, sharp claws, and huge arm strength. They will actively hunt tigers and other beasts. Actively hunting tigers, apart from humans, I am afraid that only mandrills can do such a thing. Even pythons and crocodiles can't do such a thing unless they are starving to death. Of course, mandrills are not without natural enemies. Leopards are the natural enemies of mandrills, but they only pose a certain threat to young mandrills. Once a mandrill becomes an adult, even if it is a female mandrill, the leopard will not actively attack it. That would be asking for trouble. In many contemporary records, mandrills are African animals, but this is not true. There have been records of mandrills and woodcutters in China since ancient times. This kind of big guy with a weird and scary appearance, a violent temper, and as smart as a human, has often appeared in the mountains since ancient times. There are many interactions with humans. In many stories, it is even worshipped as a mountain god. A mandrill is not scary. Its fighting power is stronger than that of a baboon, but it is also limited. 10 mandrills are not scary either, but the problem is that mandrills are large-scale social animals. According to records, the largest mandrill population ever discovered is 1,200. The fleeing animals encountered a hard problem this time, a mandrill group of about 400 mandrills, of which at least 50 or 60 are the most powerful adult male mandrills, and the remaining dozens of female mandrills, 200 or 300 young and old mandrills, whose fighting power should not be underestimated. An adult male mandrill can fight a leopard head-on and have a slight advantage. A female mandrill is weaker, but 2 or 3 of them can easily kill a leopard together. They are numerous, have strong individual combat power, and can also perform simple cooperation. The animal army led by the pandas kicked a piece of iron plate for the first time. After several battles, some soldiers were lost. After this period of continuous fighting and incorporation, the team under the pandas is not vegetarian, there are vegetarians and meat eaters. The two pandas rode on the backs of short-legged horses and walked slowly through the herd of animals like reviewing the army. After continuous battles, the fleeing animal team, which originally had only dozens of meat and vegetables, has now expanded to a somewhat astonishing scale. On the grassland, dozens of birds and beasts densely occupied half of the valley, as if all the animals in the entire mountain were concentrated here. In terms of the number of animals alone, the scale of the two pandas men now almost exceeds that of the Yangchuan Zoo. If someone pays, we can immediately build a medium-sized zoo with these animals as the team. After several fierce battles in the past few days, both sides suffered injuries, and the animal army also realized that they had provoked a tough guy this time. Mandrills are fierce and savage, and have a domineering personality. Even if they want to stop the war now, the hundreds of mandrills will not do it. A big battle between the two sides is about to break out. Thousands of animals, including herbivorous little guys like hares that pose almost no threat, and fierce generals such as grizzly bears and cheetahs, gathered together and looked at their commander, the two pandas. The atmosphere was a bit depressing, like the calm before the storm. Pandas Lele and Yingying felt a lot of pressure. If the two sides fight hard, the animal army will suppress the other side in terms of numbers, and all kinds of arms are complete, so they may not be the opponent of the mandrill group. But facing hundreds of powerful mandrills, even if they win, it will definitely be a miserable victory. After a decisive battle, these comrades who once fought together gave their lives to their partners. How many survived and how many died? No, no, no. Both pandas understood the meaning in each other's eyes. They like to play, but they never want to kill their companions. But now they have provoked the mandrills. Not far away, hundreds of mandrills stared at the large group of animals, and they couldn't retreat. They didn't want to fight, but the mandrills didn't want to. Fight or not? The grizzly bear boss rubbed his hands. Kill them. The lynx grandson grinned viciously. King, kill, kill, kill. The crocodiles slapped their tails in the mud and roared silently. Can't kill. The two pandas finally made a decision. Can't have a large-scale fight? Since the other party must fight, use a method learned from humans to solve the problem. The leaders of both sides will have a one-on-one duel. Among animals, the strongest are respected. The leader of a tribe must be the one with the strongest fighting ability, and only by relying on fighting power can he win the support of others. The authority of the tribe leader in the tribe is also unique. He has the priority of eating and mating. Other members of the tribe must unconditionally obey the arrangements of the tribe leader, unless there is a new challenger to replace him. So, as long as the other tribe leader can be defeated in a duel, the mandrill king who is as tall as a person, the problem can be solved peacefully and the group of mandrills can be subdued. As soon as this proposal was made, the animal army was the first to explode. A duel, what a joke. Isn't this a delivery? In general, the strongest animal population is the king, but this group of animal armies is completely different. From the beginning, two pandas with higher IQs than other animals of one era have been the leaders. To get out there, you have to rely on your brain. Although the two pandas are smart, they have never shown their specific combat power, and even walk on a pony mount. These two chubby, round, and funny-looking leaders are going to duel with the other mandrill king who is almost as tall as a person? This is not a joke. Everyone knows that pandas are not weak in combat. When they really get angry, they can stand people on their fists and run horses on their arms. They punch the Nanshan nursing home and kick the Behi kindergarten effortlessly. Even if they encounter a large army of urban management officers, they can still fight head-on. The problem is that pandas are only as strong as humans. They can bully those bipts, but compared with equally powerful animals, pandas have no advantage at all. There are many animals that can beat pandas, such as the grizzly bear. Ordinary pandas can be beaten by one slap, and two slaps can be beaten to a pair. Even crocodiles, leopards, and even lynx grandsons all feel that they are very convinced that the panda boss is the leader, but if it comes to fighting, they are still a little stronger than the panda boss. And since it is a one-on-one duel, only one person can be sent out, and Yingying and Lele cannot both go. After analyzing their own side, look at the opponent they are about to face, the mandrill king. What does it mean for a mandrill king to be the leader of a tribe by relying on brute force to subdue hundreds of mandrills? When thinking of the big guy he had fought with several times, even the grizzly bear boss felt a little scared. He was almost as tall as the grizzly bear boss when he stood up. Although he was slightly weaker, he was extremely flexible. In the mountains full of trees, the mandrill king was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing at will. The grizzly bear boss was known for his invincible iron palm. With one slap, a dragon would coil up and a tiger would lie down. Even the most ruthless animals would be beaten to spit out 3 liters of blood. but the problem was that it was useless if he couldn't hit them. On the contrary, the mandrill king had long arms and legs and was flexible. His claws were like sharp knives, appearing and disappearing at will. The grizzly bear boss fought with the opponent 3 times, and was fooled every time. If scars are the medals of males, then the mandrill king has definitely brought endless glory to the grizzly boss, with wounds all over his body. The same reasoning applies to other strong animals in the animal group, but they are not as flexible as the mandrill king. As for the flexible ones like lynx son and leopard, oh, just look at lynx son daddy, who took advantage of his silent walking and sneaked up behind the mandrill king last time, wanting to bang him from behind, but the mandrill king turned around, grabbed his thigh and threw him several meters away, and he hit his head on a rock, knocking out one of his front teeth. Now lynx son daddy can't even scream. Those with great strength are not as flexible as it, those who are as flexible as it are not as tough as it, those who are as tough as it are even more irritable than the mandrill, and there are some in the animal army, such as the close relative of the lynx grandson, a British short-hair cat. This is a member of the initial escape army, and should be the pet of a noble lady. It has a big face like a pancake and short 4 legs, and looks a bit like Garfield. In the eyes of the cats themselves, they are the only supreme in the world and the universe, and other races are scum, all humble garbage. The short-hair cat is not afraid of the mandrill king, and its fighting spirit is commendable. But it is obvious that the only consequence of sending it into battle is that it will be slapped into a real cat meat sauce by the mandrill king, or cat sauce for short. Moreover, this duel is a way for the 2 tribes to resolve disputes, and only the leader of the tribe can go into battle to solve the problem once and for all, otherwise the round-robin battle will never end. Finally, it was decided that the panda Yingying would go into battle. This guy has been with Su Ming the longest, and is even smarter than Lele. Animals have their own way of communicating, and soon, the declaration of war reached the group of mandrills. The mandrill king, with bright red paint on his face, stood up, and was actually half a meter taller than the surrounding male mandrills, and roared loudly in anger in the direction of the animal group in the distance. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 652. The little crested ibis had a good meal and wine, and Su Ming also found out what had happened in Qinling recently. Both sides got what they wanted. Su Ming waved goodbye to the little crested ibis, and took Su Meng to the direction of the animal army. The little crested ibis also waved its wings to Su Ming in a similar way, then stepped on the water with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow, and followed him staggeringly from behind, like a little duck following its mother duck. Haven't we already said goodbye? Don't follow me, Su Ming threatened it. If you follow me, I will catch you and take you to the zoo. The little crested ibis didn't know if it understood or not, and nodded vigorously, still following Su Ming's ass foolishly. Su Ming thought for a while before he realized that this little guy probably regarded himself as a long-term meal ticket. Follow him, there will be fish to eat. You're not stupid, Su Ming smiled, then let's go together. Su Meng, you take it? The little crested ibis walked too slowly and couldn't keep up with the pace of the 2 people, so Su Meng held it and walked together to avoid it from being a drag. The crested ibis was like a little duck, and was suddenly held in Su Meng's hand. After walking 2 steps, Su Meng grabbed Su Ming. He held the crested ibis in both hands and handed it over, as if he had discovered something very important. What's wrong? Su Ming was slightly stunned. It was just a crested ibis. What was there to be surprised about? Could it be that even Su Meng had learned to be sneaky and found it troublesome to hold a tiny crested ibis? Su Meng held the crested ibis with one big hand, and turned it over with the other hand, with its belly facing up, revealing its furry abdomen, and then used his hand to dig in the fur between its legs. A straight little thing was revealed. It's hard, Su Ming was shocked. This bastard. He could even get hard after eating a fish. But he soon realized that he was wrong. This thing was not the little penis of the crested ibis. What is this? Su Ming was a little confused. He touched it with his hand. It was hard and there were bones inside. It looked like it had some kind of disease, bone hyperplasia. But there were several small protrusions around the top of this little thing. It looked like an underdeveloped little claw. Could it be a leg? Su Ming suddenly realized that the shape of this small protrusion was exactly the same as the two legs of the crested ibis, but it was reduced several times in the same proportion. A crested ibis with 3 legs? Su Ming scratched the red face of the little crested ibis and asked it puzzledly. The little crested ibis itself was also confused. It seemed that it was born to be different like this, and it couldn't figure out what was going on. This is not understandable. I have never heard of a 3-legged crested ibis. There are very few 3-legged creatures in the entire animal kingdom. As the saying goes, it is hard to find a 3-legged toad, but 2-legged people are everywhere. This is what it means. 3 legs do not conform to the physiological structure and it is difficult to maintain balance. The only 3-legged creature I have seen is the 3-legged Tyrannosaurus rex. Although there is a magical legend about that thing, it cut off one of its legs to refuse military service, but legends are just legends after all. Su Ming thinks that the Tyrannosaurus rex probably had one of its legs bitten off by some beast when it was a child, so it became a 3-legged creature. What's the matter with this little guy? Born with 3 legs? The little crested ibis called out, and it seemed that the belly-up posture was not very comfortable. It turned over and pressed the 3rd leg under its body. Never mind it, just keep going. Su Ming thought for a while, but couldn't figure it out. He just let it go, saving brain cells. 3 legs is 3 legs. The world is so big that there are all kinds of wonders. Some things cannot be explained by current science. Maybe this is a kind of crested ibis that has never been discovered, or even not a crested ibis at all, but a 3-legged bird that looks like a crested ibis. In ancient times, there was a legend about 3-legged birds. The son of the Emperor of Heaven was a 3-legged bird, representing light and fire. It was a kind of divine bird, and its scientific name was the 3-legged golden crow. This is how he shot at the sun. There are 4 kinds of divine beasts in Chinese legends: the azure dragon, the white tiger, the black tortoise, and the vermilion bird. The vermilion bird belongs to the fire element, which is somewhat related to the 3-legged golden crow. However, from the perspective of biological level, the 3-legged golden crow should be a higher level. There is no way. It has a good background. Its father is the Emperor of Heaven, belonging to the leadership class. The 4 divine beasts are at most recruited by the grassroots. It is said that the true identity of Lu Ya, the mysterious troublemaker in the investiture of the gods, is the 3-legged crow that escaped when Ho Yi shot the sun. Legends are just for fun, Su Ming will not take it too seriously. The crested ibis may have grown a 3rd leg, or it may be some strange mutation, such as those big flying foxes, which became vampire bats after having relevant contact with the spiritual power of the underground cave. There is no need to delve too deeply into the mysteries of nature. The Earth has existed for 4.6 billion years. With the current level of human technology, it may not even be able to solve 1% of the mysteries of the Earth. Although humans rule the Earth, their understanding of the Earth is not as profound as they imagine. In the opposite direction of Su Ming, more than 10 kilometers away, Park Genji and 5 field experts also entered the Kinling Mountains and began to head towards the mountains. In the mountains, Park Genji, who is in his 40s, has changed his image of a white-collar worker in the city. He is wearing camouflage uniforms and thick-soled military boots, carrying more than 20 kilograms of equipment and supplies, but he does not seem to be tired at all. He is even more adapted to the mountain environment than other professional poachers. While camping, several people took out a map of the Kinling area. Mr. Park, according to the information we have, This area should be concentrated with a large group of mandrills. Mandrills are very aggressive, so we'd better avoid them. A poacher drew a small circle on the map. Although the mandrill looks strange, it is not a rare animal and has little economic value. Unless the entire group of hundreds of them are caught and packaged for wholesale, it is obviously not something that the few people in front of them can do. Even if they put anesthetics in the food and water sources to knock out the mandrills, they can't smuggle hundreds of mandrills out of the country. The most annoying thing for poachers in the mountains is to encounter this kind of worthless and particularly ferocious group animals. It is dangerous and wastes ammunition. If you are not careful, you can't make money, but you will lose your life. What is the longitude and latitude here? Park Genji asked. The man just drew 2 strokes on the map with a ruler and reported 2 numbers. Hearing the longitude and latitude of the mandrills, Park Genji's heart jumped suddenly. This location is very close to the location where his ancestors encountered a mysterious incident with Japanese soldiers. If we go around it? Park Genji drew a curve on the map and said in a deep voice, both sides are close to 60-degree slopes, which are very difficult to pass through and will greatly slow down our speed. The other few people were all hired by Park Genji. Of course, they followed his lead. Seeing him say this, the others did not say much and began to sort out their equipment silently, taking out their guns from their backpacks, checking their performance, and loading ammunition. Although the mandrills are fierce, they can only flee in front of human firearms. An adult mandrill can be easily killed with 2 or 3 bullets within 10 meters. The few people present did not dare to say that everyone was a sharpshooter, but they were definitely experienced in using guns. The 6 people joined forces and were not afraid of the group of mandrills. Since they were smuggled into the country, they basically brought light weapons and small caliber pistols. Only a scarred Chinese character held a homemade shotgun rifle made in an underground arsenal, which could fire 2 shots in a row. The bullets were steel balls, which could cover a distance of 10 meters in front of them after being sprayed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 653. The animal army led by the panda and the group of mandrills were confronting each other, unaware that 2 groups of people were approaching them from 2 different directions. The attention of the 2 groups of animals was completely focused on a duel between the bosses of both sides. Before the fight really started, the mandrill king was a little confused. Having lived in the mountains for half a lifetime, the mandrill king had seen all kinds of powerful beasts. He was not really afraid of ordinary tigers and lions. But the panda's routines were too deep, all routines. As soon as Ying appeared, she stood on one leg, followed by a set of strange-looking moves. This set of flowery boxing and embroidered legs from the promotional video of the zoo's martial arts competition brought a lot of pressure to the mandrill king. Fear comes from the unknown. The mandrill king was a little confused. Is this guy a panda? Or some other creature? Looking at the opponent who stretched his legs, twisted his buttocks, and turned hollow somersaults, the mandrill king was completely dumbfounded. As a wild beast, the mandrill king had never seen such a flexible panda. When it comes to animals that imitate humans, primates are the undisputed #1 in the world, but the black and white fat man in front of him is just a human in panda skin. Before the fight started, the mandrill king was a little confused, not knowing what kind of thing he was facing. Entering the battle with this uneasy mentality, the mandrill king's original momentum of winning immediately weakened. At the beginning, he was hit by Ying-Ying's heart-piercing punch. Ying-Ying's few fancy moves were really well made. A wild beating that didn't follow the rules caught the mandrill king off guard. However, the real strength gap between the 2 sides was here after all. After being hit a few times, the mandrill king quickly adjusted his state, and his sand bowl-sized fist smashed Ying-Ying wildly. Ying was not to be outdone, and her equally sharp claws were waving. To the surprise of many animals, Ying was surprisingly flexible and seemed to have sufficient fighting experience, especially the magical move of rolling with her head in her arms. Every time she could roll to the side like a big meatball under the powerful attack of the Mandrill King, she could avoid the attack. The fighting power of the panda itself should not be underestimated. A slap or a claw can also make the Mandrill King suffer a big loss. After fighting for more than 10 minutes, the Mandrill King and Ying were both exhausted. Fighting was too physically demanding. Even the muscular Mandrill King and Ying, who had been trained in the zoo's martial arts competition, could not stand the high intensity and non-stop fighting for more than 10 minutes. The panda leaned on a big rock, gasping for breath, and his tongue was sticking out. The two long arms of the Mandrill King, as if they were dislocated, hung limply on both sides of the body and swayed, and he didn't even have the strength to raise his hands. It looks like there will be no fight today, and we can only fight again tomorrow. Both sides stopped fighting and returned to their own territory to rest. But within a few hours, the animals heard a few crisp pa-pa-pa sounds from the hilltop occupied by the mandrills not far away. Immediately afterwards, these sounds became more and more frequent, and the opposite mountain was like a frying pan, with the roars of the mandrills, and mandrills kept escaping from the mountain. After being with humans for a long time, the two pandas quickly distinguished that the snapping sounds seemed to be human weapons, guns. The two pandas looked at each other. In the face of human modern weapons, the number and bravery of the mandrills could not play a big role. Why can a small team with only dozens of animals at the beginning grow and become thousands of animals in a short period of time, sweeping across the kindling area? A spark can start a prairie fire. Because from the beginning, the strategy of the two pandas was not to eliminate other animals, but to unite all forces that can be united, unite all species that can be united, and strengthen their own strength. Although they had been fighting fiercely with the mandrills in the past few days, there was no fundamental conflict between the two sides. Compared with human hunters, the previous incident was at most an internal conflict among animals. In front of hunters, all animals had the same stance and were on the same front. The two pandas made a decision at the same time to go and see what happened, maybe they could help. As soon as they led the team to the foot of the mountain, they saw the Mandrill King covered in blood, holding several small mandrills and fleeing from the forest in a panic, and several people were chasing after him with guns. Roar, the Mandrill King was shocked when he saw the pandas and their men blocking the road. Are you in the same group with this group of humans? You beasts, traitors! Park Genji didn't expect to find a Mandrill King. He insisted on taking the route to the mandrill's habitat, mainly because he had a glimmer of hope that he could discover the mysterious power in his family's legend. He did not expect to make money by catching a few ordinary mandrills, nor did he want to kill them deliberately. He was a poacher, not a violent maniac. As long as the mandrills did not come to hinder him, there was no need to carry out meaningless killings. But no one expected that there would be a Mandrill King in the mandrill territory. Quantitative change leads to qualitative change. Ordinary mandrills are indeed not worth much, but the value of a Mandrill King is completely different. The three words Mandrill King are not something that can be called casually. Even the most powerful patriarch of an ordinary mandrill tribe cannot be called the Mandrill King. Strictly speaking, the king mandrill is a variant of the mandrill. This kind of mandrill is far superior to other ordinary mandrills in terms of size, strength, and wisdom. It naturally has a dominant position in the mandrill tribe. The difference between the king mandrill and the mandrill is like the difference between the queen bee and the bee. No matter how powerful the bee is, it is just a big honey, not the queen bee. There must be a queen bee in every group of bees, but the king mandrill is extremely rare. Only when the mandrill tribe reaches a certain scale can the king mandrill be born, and this possibility is very low. In ancient Korea and China, there are legends about mountain gods, which actually refer to the king mandrill. This rare big guy is said to have various magical effects of guarding the house, warding off evil spirits, and communicating with gods, and it is said to be very mysterious. And unlike ordinary mandrills, the king mandrill can be tamed because of its high intelligence. Just imagine how majestic and overbearing it would be to keep a mountain god at home. So in the international market, the price of a mandrill king is actually higher than that of a panda, because most wealthy local tyrants prefer to keep those mysterious and ferocious animals. Although they didn't come for this group of mandrills, the situation was different after they found the mandrill king. It's like a group of thieves who were originally going to rob a house on the second floor. When they walked to the first floor, they found that the door was open, no one was at home, and there were wallets and laptops on the table. They would definitely take advantage of the situation and make a fortune first. If the hostess was taking a bath, they would probably rob her. The mandrill king that fell from the sky is a small mobile treasure house. Don't rob it if you don't want to. Park Genji didn't think twice and rushed to the mandrill king with a few men. Several humans appeared in the territory of the mandrills, as conspicuous as fireflies in the dark night. No matter the sound or smell, the mandrills could not escape. Before they approached the king of mandrills, the surrounding mandrills on guard discovered these people. Roar, a male mandrill squatting on a branch shouted a warning sound, and at the same time, jumped down from the branch and pounced on the nearest poacher. The man raised his hand very skillfully, without aiming, he fired 3 shots, and then his body slightly tilted. The mandrill sentry who was shot in the air pounced on nothing and hit the ground with his head. Blood flowed from the muzzle of the gun and died after a few convulsions. The warning sound and the gunshot alarmed other mandrills. The king of mandrills was furious. Is there any justice in this world? He just dealt with a group of foreign animals, and then a few humans who came out of nowhere followed him. It was clear that he would not let him live a peaceful life. Just one word, the king of mandrills was really angry. He couldn't do anything to those animals, so what about a few humans? Although the weapons in their hands looked very powerful, there were only 6 of them after all. There were hundreds of mandrills here. Even the weakest young mandrills could cause fatal damage to humans. If it were a group of poachers, the king of mandrills' simplest judgment would have absolutely no problem. But the group of people brought by Park Genji were all masters, with rich experience in fighting animals in the wild. They cooperated with each other in a tacit understanding and formed a simple and effective defensive formation. Although there were only 6 people and 8 guns, the gunshots never stopped, and they kept almost the same frequency, knocking down the mandrills that rushed in front of them. The black-faced man in the team, holding a double-barreled shotgun rifle, would shoot away any slippery fish that rushed in front of him. This scene was like hundreds of years ago, when Indians rode horses, wielded spears, and rushed towards the colonists' positions full of muskets and artillery. There was no second possibility except a one-sided massacre. The 6 people took turns to cover each other and replace ammunition. The brave mandrills were like waves hitting the reefs again and again. The waves were broken into powder, but the reefs remained motionless. Mr. Park, if we continue to fight like this, our ammunition will soon be insufficient. A black-faced man raised his hand and shot a mandrill through the eye, and changed the magazine skillfully, saying without looking back. After all, Park Genji's group was only here to poach, not to fight, so it was impossible for them to carry too much ammunition. In order to prevent accidents, Park Genji had specially arranged for everyone to bring twice as much ammunition, but it could not withstand the current level of consumption. There are hundreds of mandrills, and it takes 3 or 4 bullets to kill one on average. To wipe out this group, at least thousands of bullets are needed. How could these 6 people carry so many bullets? Park Genji shot with a blank expression and said calmly, "Keep shooting. They will collapse on their own." As expected by Park Genji, after losing more than 30 mandrills, facing this terrifying force that had never been seen before, the mandrill group finally collapsed. No matter how smart the Mandrill King was, he could not guess that the opponent's ammunition was insufficient. As long as a few dozen lives were added, the opponent would be exhausted. Run! A large group of mandrills fled in all directions. The Mandrill King wanted to escape, but Park Genji would not let it go. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 654. When we meet on a narrow road, the brave wins. The panda led a group of animals, and the Mandrill King, who was leading several small mandrills to escape, happened to come face to face. Both guys were stunned. The Mandrill King, who was so majestic a few hours ago, was now in a miserable state, covered in blood, with a small hole on his thigh that was bleeding out. The pursuers behind him were getting closer and closer, and they could smell the scent of humans and hear the sounds of human conversations. Roar! The Mandrill King raised his head to the sky and shouted unwillingly. I didn't expect that I would die in the hands of a group of beasts and traitors after being so wise for half of my life. You panda, you look loyal and naive, but I didn't expect that you are actually a lackey of humans. No wonder they were able to sweep through the kindling mountains in such a short period of time, and they gathered such a large team and made the mountain go crazy. It turned out that they were hugging the lap of a human father. It's so embarrassing for pandas, hawks, eagles and dogs just shamelessly follow humans around. Who would have thought that even pandas have become human beings? No, bear legs. Cat legs. Not only did he discredit the panda clan, but he also defrauded the bear and cat clans. Damn it, even if I die, I will get rid of you as a harm to the animal world. The Mandrill King thought that the panda and the humans behind him were in the same group, so he roared and tried to fight the panda. If the panda knew that the Mandrill King regarded him as a beast, he would definitely be so angry that he would yell, "Immortal Ban Ban, you are the beast, your whole family is." Just as they were about to struggle, the pursuers behind them had already caught up. Standing on the hillside, Park Genji was shocked. There was no place to look for after breaking through the iron shoes, and it took no effort to get there. There was a dense group of animals at the bottom of the hillside. The two leading animals were covered in black and white. Aren't they the same group that escaped from the airport? The real goal of their trip. But according to the clues, there were only a few dozen animals that escaped from the airport, but the valley in front of them was densely packed with animals, at least thousands. Where did so many animals come from? There was no time to think about it. One of the poachers brought by Park Genji had already put on a tranquilizer gun. He pointed it at a panda below from a distance and shot it. Ying and Mandrill King were about to start a fight, and they all twisted together. Lele jumped on a big rock, not sure whether to stop the fight or to cheer up. Suddenly, she felt as if she had been bitten by a big mosquito on her buttocks, and it was numb. Numb, itchy. Subconsciously, I turned my head to look. I saw a small red needle stuck in my butt. Before I could reach out to pull it out, the world started spinning. OMG, I'm going to get rich, there are so many little golden stars floating around. Lele stood on the big rock, swaying, and then fell down, half opening his mouth, looking at the sky stupidly, with a confused look on his face. Ying and Mandrill King, who were about to start fighting, were stunned. Ying has seen anesthesia needles before. Good guy, these people not only want to deal with mandrills, but they also want to take our attention. The Mandrill King was a little frightened. It was lucky just now, and it wasn't the anesthesia gun that hit it. Otherwise, it would have been captured long ago. Bang bang bang, several people quickly approached the valley, and shot any animals that dared to block them without even looking at them. 2 pandas and a Mandrill King, now you can make a profit, catch them all in one go. Even if there is no other gain from this trip, just these 3 big guys are enough. Ying sweats and feels anxious. What should I do? What should we do now? No one knows how many animals will die if you fight hard, and the survival instinct of animals comes first. If you let them block the eye, they may disperse in a hurry. If you run away, you may not be able to escape these humans, and if you run away in such a hurry, the team that was finally pulled together will definitely break up. If the people's hearts are lost, the team will be completely unable to lead, and all previous efforts will be in vain. Bang! A stray bullet flew over and hit a rock not far away. Sparks flew everywhere, and the ricochet flew past Yingying's scalp, smoothly opening a hairless passage in the center of the head. Yingying was so frightened that she scratched her neck and touched her head. Damn it, she gave me a split right in the middle. But this did give it an inspiration. He waved his big bare paw to let the Mandrill King and other animals go first, and then he came to the rear with a group of men. The Mandrill King opened his eyes a little unexpectedly and looked at Yingying strangely. In the blink of an eye, he changed from a beast and a traitor to a self-sacrificial friend. This change of attitude was too fast. The Mandrill King found it difficult to accept it for a while. Yingying glared at the Mandrill King impatiently, with an impatient look on her face. You have been the king of the mountain for so many years, and you have hundreds of people in charge. Can you stop being such a mother-in-law and leave quickly to save me from dragging you down? Hind legs. The Mandrill King hesitated for a moment, and finally grabbed Lele, who had fainted, on his shoulders, and retreated quickly with large strides along with the army of animals. Mr. Park, the animals are starting to escape. Catch up. The two pandas are the first target, and the Mandrill King is the second target. The Mandrill King has been shot, and one panda has been hit by anesthesia and can't escape far. These field experts are the best in the industry, and each mission is expensive. As long as they lock the target, it will be difficult for animals to escape their pursuit, even in the deep mountains. Not long after he rushed down to catch up, a poacher felt his feet slip and seemed to have stepped on something. When he lowered his head, he saw that it was a round thing, like a small landmine. After he stepped on it, this little landmine actually came to life, rolled up and hit his calf hard. Even though the mine was not that big, it was quite powerful. With such force, the poacher was hit with severe pain in his calf. He staggered back a few steps and almost fell down. Suddenly, a dozen of these moving little mines appeared on the hillside, chasing the poachers all over the hillside. What? The poacher who was hit first raised his hand and shot without thinking. The bullet accurately hit the small mine, but there was no explosion. The surface of the small mine seemed to have a dense layer of scales. When the bullet hit it, it brought out a stream of fire and flew in the direction of the rolling scales. Where has it gone? At the same time, several other poachers also had the same reaction. After discovering these threatening small landmines, they subconsciously raised their hands and shot. Wait a minute, Park Genji just shouted, but it was already too late. These small rolling mines are completely bullet busters. Ordinary pistol bullets cannot penetrate their scales at all, and they all turn into stray bullets flying randomly. These people were covering each other, and they were already very close to each other. With such random shooting, two people were immediately hit by stray bullets. Bang bang, the two guys who were shot fired a few more shots in a hurry. We can't blame them. After the first round of shooting, they immediately realized that the shell of these small mines was too hard. Not only were they not afraid of the gun, but they could also cause ricochet. At this time, shooting indiscriminately was a gamble on their lives. But the problem is that after they fell, several small landmines rolled towards their heads immediately. If they hit it, the game would be over immediately. What's more, stray bullets don't bounce straight and shoot by themselves. Can't hit myself. What was even more unlucky was that the black-faced man holding a shotgun also pulled the trigger, and the steel balls spurted out like pear blossoms in the rain. It really blew away the three small landmines that flew over, but those round steel balls also changed their flight trajectory and turned into life-threatening little naughty things, swishing around without any pattern. After several gunshots, Park Genji was completely stunned. Of the 5 teammates who were hired at a high price, it seemed like he was the only one left standing. He didn't know whether he should be grateful that his luck was extremely good, or depressed that his luck was extremely bad. There was a burst of gunfire, and the other 5 of the 6 people gathered together were shot, but he was the only one who was not shot. After a brief glance, his eyelids were twitching. All 5 people were still alive. The power of the ricochet weakened a lot after turning. It was not fatal immediately, but it was enough to incapacitate people in a short period of time. This was more troublesome than him being shot. It used to be that a group of 6 people went to hunt animals, but now it's better. 5 people were shot to death. He was alone and had to take care of the other 5 people. In movies and TV shows, the situation where a companion is abandoned or even killed directly after being injured is still a very extreme situation after all. Under normal circumstances, these 5 people were hired by him with money. Whether it was for moral reasons or for his own future reputation, he could not ignore them. Armadillo. It's armadillo. Damn armadillo. It's an armadillo. This guy who looks like a pangolin is covered in bone armor that is much harder than a pangolin. It looks like layers of fish scales. This layer of bone armor has been with the armadillo since it was young. It travels underground and rubs against hard rocks and gravel, making it extremely strong. If the pistol bullet hits it at the right angle, it will fly away at most a piece of bone armor. It is not painful or itchy for the armadillo, just like a human being having his nails cut off. If the angle is slightly skewed, it will be carried away along the slope of the bone armor. Fly, forming stray bullets. In terms of burrowing ability, armadillos are actually still ahead of pangolins. It is almost impossible for ordinary people to catch armadillos in the wild without tools. This little burrowing expert can dig on hard ground in 1 minute. Make a hole big enough to accommodate yourself. By the time you see it and are about to catch it, the armadillo has disappeared from the surface. By the time you get in, it has moved a lot deeper. Ying herself didn't expect the effect to be so good. She originally just hoped that the armadillo could hold off the poachers for a while. Armadillos have thick bone armor and are the only animals that are not afraid of pistols. In addition, the hillsides are covered with soft soil, so they can easily dig a hole and escape without worrying about being caught. A dozen armadillos rolling around like watermelons should be a certain obstacle to these people, right? This was Ying's initial idea, to delay time and give the large army a chance to escape. Unexpectedly, after a burst of gunfire, the other party was all lying down. How did you say this? Armadillo Man, who had accomplished great feats, rolled down the hillside and returned to Ying. He spread out his body and revealed his small nose and mouth. Withdraw. She gave up when she saw the opportunity. Ying was not willing to fight, and led Armadillo Gate to join the main force. After climbing over 2 mountains, we finally rejoined the main force smoothly. Thanks to the cover of Ying and the armadillo, the previous animal army retreated smoothly and did not break up and run around. Most of the animals met here. In addition, about 200 to 300 fleeing mandrills were also gathered into a team by the Mandrill King and gathered on the other side of the forest. However, it seems that after such a battle with the same hatred and the same enemy, the originally tense relationship between the two parties has suddenly become much more harmonious. In the animal population, the chief not only has the supreme power to rule over other animals, but also has the obligation to protect the tribe. In the battle just now, even though the Mandrill King was shot, he did not forget to cover the rear when he fled, and also protected several small mandrills to escape together. Panda Yingying took the initiative to come over to support, covering the other party and letting the other party go first, which won the respect of the Mandrill King. To a certain extent, it also established its reputation in the Mandrill tribe. The Mandrill King limped over, lifted Yingying above his head, and put it on his head, roaring loudly at other mandrills. The revolutionary team has grown again. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 655. With the idea of trying to have as little contact with humans as possible, the fleeing animals did not stay in place for too long after reuniting with the group of mandrills, and once again marched into the deep mountains. This time, the animals did not stop until they reached the depths of the real Qin forest, and carried out a series of reorganizations. With the addition of the Mandrill King with hundreds of subordinates and their families, the overall strength of the previous animal army has almost doubled. The key is that with dozens of male mandrills, in conjunction with the warlike animals in the original animal army, the animal army can finally carry out some simple division of labor. Some weak animals have been separated from the battle sequence, and strong animals have been formed into special combat teams. Some animals are suitable for fighting, some are suitable for reconnaissance, and some are suitable for casting nests. In fact, most animals do not understand why the two panda kings make things so complicated. The previous situation where everyone fights together and eats together is actually quite good. They just do whatever the panda king tells them to do. Even the two pandas themselves couldn't explain why they had the idea to divide the work among the animal groups. Is it for fun? It seems so, but it also seems not. It seems that there is a voice in their hearts calling them to do this. The two pandas did not realize that they had unknowingly developed from unorganized and undisciplined refugees to regular troops. Animal groups often carry out simple cooperative division of labor. But that is usually instinctive and unconscious. The conscious, top-down cooperative division of labor among the animal army has already had some rudiments of human society. Under the guidance of the pandas, the animals even began to consciously make and use tools. The grizzly bear boss put on a thick layer of bark armor and carried a small tree thicker than an adult's thigh all day long. His combat effectiveness was indeed greatly improved. The Mandrill King was no match for the grizzly bear holding a big tree pole. After several fights, he was chased by the grizzly bear and fled in a panic, and could not get close to the grizzly bear at all. Of course, the Mandrill King also has his own secret weapon. After Lele woke up from the anesthesia, he found several venomous snakes in the team and ordered them to spit out some venom frequently. When the essence is full, it will overflow. The same is true for poison. Anyway, there is no need to bite other animals. It is idle anyway, so don't waste the venom. All these venoms were smeared on the metal debris found from nowhere. Now among the animals, the Mandrill King, who ranks third, will not show his weapons easily in the battles and exchanges with teammates. Once he shows his weapons, the rust on the metal pieces and the snake venom can easily kill people. Defensive animals, such as wild boars, have strengthened the training of the armor on their backs. They rub against trees with rosin esters all day long, and a thick layer of armor has formed on their bodies. They are not afraid even if they encounter pistols again. Others, those who build nests, those who patrol, and those who explore the environment are distributed all over the mountain. In a mysterious valley deep in the Kindling Mountains, a small animal kingdom is being built silently. 2 flowers bloom, each showing its own beauty. Eat something first. Su Ming handed a piece of compressed biscuit to the middle-aged man with a resolute face opposite. He found this person by the stream at the foot of the mountain. He was not alone at the time. There was a long safety rope behind him, like a string of grasshoppers. 4 people were strung together. This middle-aged man led the group, and the people behind him all suffered from gunshot wounds of varying degrees. When they met this group of people, they all fainted in the woods not far from the stream. It seemed that they were looking for water and finally couldn't stand up after struggling to get here. Su Ming spent a lot of effort and finally saved the leader. There was really no way to save the remaining 3. When Su Ming arrived, they had already died. This person, of course, is Park Genji and his group of unlucky subordinates. In history, it is probably the first time that a person was killed by a stray bullet while hunting an animal. If this thing can be reported in the newspaper, it will definitely be recorded in history and write a strong and colorful stroke in the poaching industry. After being shot, 2 people died on the spot. The remaining 4 people, led by Park Genji, followed the road out of the mountain and supported each other to walk out. Originally, with their equipment level, it was not too difficult to get out of the mountain first. Unfortunately, there was a commotion after being shot that day, and the escaping mandrills stole most of their equipment. Park Genji can speak Chinese. After being rescued by Su Ming, no matter how Su Ming asked, he refused to say a word. When Su Ming asked urgently, he just said a few words in Korean to deal with it. It can be said that Park Genji is lucky. These people have gunshot wounds on their bodies, calluses on their knuckles, and they carry guns with them. It is obvious that they are not hikers. Since they were not hikers, a group of foreigners suddenly appeared in the deep mountains and forests, and were shot. They must not be good people. They were most likely poachers. If it were in the past, even if Su Ming did not kill Park Genji like he did to the first group of poachers he met, he would not be able to save him, and would most likely let him fend for himself. But as his vision improved and his abilities gradually increased, Su Ming, who could call on 6 life-saving magic balls at any time, was almost invincible in the mountains, and a poacher could not hurt him at all. So, after a simple search of Park Genji and confiscating his guns and weapons, Su Ming rescued him. Park Genji took the compressed biscuit and ate it hungrily. He choked before finishing one bite. Su Ming handed a pot of water to the side. Park Genji raised his head and drank it hard. Okay. Well, I'm choking again now. Eat slowly, I still have a lot, Su Ming said expressionlessly. It was a comforting word, but his tone sounded like he wanted to kill the other person. Park Genji nodded subconsciously, carefully opened a small piece of biscuit and stuffed it into his mouth, poured some water into the kettle cup, and sipped it little by little. Su Ming sneered in his heart and continued to pretend. If you can understand Chinese, it must not be difficult to speak it. He wanted to see who this guy was. Su Ming was not in a hurry to expose this person. He turned around and shouted at the little crested ibis that was catching fish in the creek, "Xiaohong, come back, don't run too far." The 3-legged crested ibis with a red mouth and red face was completely attached to Su Ming, a wealthy man. He had no worries about food and drink, and followed Su Ming wholeheartedly. As usual, everyone would give a name for the convenience of addressing them. Su Ming used his brain and thought of several names that he thought were good. Xiaosan, calves, finally settled on Xiaohong under Su Ming's contemptuous eyes. Along the way, he had discovered large-scale fights and traces of animals in the surrounding area. Most of the poachers in front of him had fought with animals on the previous mountain, so he could not say that the area was necessarily safe. This little poacher, it is better not to leave the crested ibis out of sight. Park Genji, who was eating compressed biscuits, was stunned when he saw the crested ibis Xiaohong running back from the water. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 656. Firebird. Park Genji saw the crested ibis with a tuft of red hair on its head and a bright red tip of its beak. His expression was slightly shocked, and he said vaguely while holding a compressed biscuit in his mouth. The words were still spoken in Korean. Although Su Ming did not understand him, he was not blind. Park Genji's expression was obviously abnormal. The crested ibis is a national protected animal and an endangered wild animal. People who are ignorant will be amazed by its unique and gorgeous appearance when they see it. People who are knowledgeable will be surprised to find a wild crested ibis, but in any case, it should not be ordinary. Genji's expression just now was like seeing a ghost. When a normal person sees a white rhinoceros or a Siberian tiger, does it feel like he has seen a ghost? Obviously not, unless what he saw was a Tyrannosaurus rex, or a divine dragon. Yes, Park Genji's expression just now was like seeing a monster that could only exist in legends. Something's wrong, it's just a crested ibis. Su Ming glanced at the little crested ibis calmly, and secretly sent a burst of spiritual power to the little crested ibis. The little crested ibis now looks more and more like a wild duck. It wiggles its buttocks as it walks, and wanders past Su Ming. It seems to be attracted by the compressed biscuit dregs scattered around Park Genji, and gets closer. Park Genji. Sure enough, Park Genji didn't even bother to eat, and subconsciously wanted to hug the crested ibis. Just as he was about to catch the crested ibis, another hand suddenly appeared out of thin air and took the first step to hold the crested ibis in his arms. Xiaohong, don't run around, Su Ming said with a smile while holding the crested ibis in his arms. Park Genji's hands froze in place, and he smiled blankly, as if he was sorry for offending his savior's property without permission. Then, while eating, he secretly glanced at the crested ibis in Su Ming's arms. Su Ming was completely unaware of the eyes of the man opposite him. The little crested ibis turned over and over in his arms, as if trying to find a more comfortable way to lie down. Su Ming played with the down on its belly casually, seemingly casually. In the middle, the third leg on the belly of the little crested ibis is exposed. Every time he sees the third leg on the crested ibis belly, Park Genji's eyelids can't help but beat wildly. So similar. Could the legend be true? Are there really three-legged firebirds? But why is the legendary three-legged firebird only so small and looks completely harmless to humans and animals? How did such a big little guy kill dozens of heavily armed combatants? Actually getting very close to a human? Seeing that the little bird in front of him seemed to be the creature in the family legend, Park Genji couldn't help it anymore. He took a sip of water, cleared his throat, and pretended to speak in unfamiliar Chinese. "Thank you for saving me." "You're welcome," Su Ming chuckled and finally spoke. It seems that the crested ibis in his arms is very attractive to this guy, enough so that he can speak Chinese at the risk of revealing his identity. Park Genji's eyes were obviously about to grow hooks. He stared at the crested ibis, making it clear that he was interested in this little bird. However, Su Ming pretended not to understand anything, and after a faint response, he just said one sentence not to mention. He didn't show the slightest curiosity and asked Park Genji about his origins, and he didn't take the initiative to ask Park Genji why he was curious about the crested ibis. Anyway, he is not in a hurry. If Park Genji doesn't say anything, he will definitely not speak first to see who can bear it. Somewhat quiet. Park Genji's mind was spinning rapidly. If the situation were different, he would have many ways to get this firebird, even if he killed the young man in front of him. But it didn't work now. All the men who came with him were dead, and his own body was in an extremely weak state. Even his guns were confiscated by the other party, leaving him without any force to rely on. The big man who came with the other party was not someone to be trifled with at first glance. Park Genji, who has rich experience in survival in the wild, is very accurate in reading people and has an almost animal-like intuition for dangerous creatures. What's more, he is now confused as to whether this bird is a firebird or not. Where did it come from? What does it have to do with family legends? There are a lot of confusions that cannot be answered, and I can only rely on the young man in front of me. The only hope may be right in front of him. Park Genji decided not to miss this opportunity no matter what. He couldn't help but ask first, "Mr. Su, can you show me this red bird in your arms?" Su Ming smiled and did not answer him directly. He casually glanced at the forest not far away. Several people who came with him died in the forest. Su Ming just dug a hole and buried those people. Ahem. Park Genji coughed twice. A group of foreigners, armed with weapons, appeared deep in the inaccessible Kinling Mountains and were seriously injured. This must be given a reasonable explanation no matter what. Obviously, this is not easy to explain at all. Park Genji can see that although the Mr. Su in front of him is very young, he is not easy to deceive. Ordinary tourists will never go deep into the Kinling Mountains, and these two people are not like ordinary wilderness survival enthusiasts. They obviously have a purpose for coming here. You know people, but you don't know the heart, but it's not impossible to tell a person's good and evil. Park Genji has been in the industry for many years, dealing with all kinds of religions. If he didn't have a vicious look, he wouldn't even be able to understand people, and he would have died long ago. How many times? Su Ming is not an ordinary person, nor is he a bad person. In other words, Park Genji himself is also such a person. He will not hurt others for no reason unless necessary. But he was not sure what Su Ming's background was. There were some things he could say, and some he had to reserve. After thinking for a while, he said, "My nephew, a very smart boy, suffered from a very strange disease. According to my family's records, there may be medicine in the Kinling Mountains that can cure him, so I hired these people and worked with me. Let's go into the Kinling Mountains to look for." Park Genji didn't tell lies, but he didn't tell the truth either. In order to save the only male in the family, an uncle brought a group of hired men and encountered a large group of animals in the mountains. Rather than a poaching story. A radio. Su Ming almost laughed. Those two pandas really had a trick. They actually thought of letting the armadillo block the bullet. Small things like armadillos are indeed a poacher's nightmare. Rifle bullets are better. Ordinary pistol bullets and rifles are better used to fight armadillos than to use sticks and shoot at armadillos at close range. Risking your life. This also explains why the wounds on those people seemed to be caused by the guns they used. Su Ming thought at first that there was a fight within the rebellion. People who can use guns are not ordinary people. Both parties know it well. Park Genji can only talk to this point. Su Ming nodded and handed the crested ibis to Park Genji. "The medicine you mentioned that can cure the disease is this crested ibis," Su Ming asked strangely. "How to cure it? Eat it steamed or grilled?" No, it is not used to treat diseases, but it is related to this bird." Park Genji took the crested ibis Yahong, touched the third leg on its abdomen, and his eyes lit up. Sure enough, it was exactly the same as the one in the family legend, a three-legged crested ibis, or rather, a three-legged strange bird that looked like a crested ibis. A mountain of elixir, which can be taken to make people live longer, whose flesh and bones can make the living dead prolong life, firebirds descending from the sky, tearing apart fully armed soldiers and feeding on people. The fragmented fragments of the legend were put together to form a somewhat fantasy or terrifying picture in Park Genji's mind. Strangely, the little crested ibis, who had been so honest just now, suddenly became very uneasy after leaving Su Ming and being in the hands of Park Genji. He twisted his body anxiously and made a growling sound in his stomach, which seemed to be very uncomfortable. He looked like he was struggling to crawl out of Park Genji's arms. Park Genji's hand holding the crested ibis subconsciously exerted some force, which immediately angered the little guy. He flapped his wings and pecked Park Genji's arm hard with his long, slightly curved beak. The long beak of the crested ibis was like a steel awl. When he was caught off guard, Park Genji's arm suddenly opened a big hole, and blood flowed profusely. The little crested ibis escaped and barked at Park Genji twice very ferociously, looking very irritable. The cry was like the cracking of gold and stone, very harsh. Even Su Ming didn't expect that the crested ibis Yahong, who had been quite well behaved all the way, would be so ferocious. Strictly speaking, it is cruel. Su Ming had rarely seen animal cubs be so aggressive. Even baby crocodiles and wolf cubs would not harm humans so seriously when they were not hungry. "Come back." Seeing that the crested ibis was about to bite Pu Genji again, Su Ming grabbed its wings and grabbed it back like a chicken. The little crested ibis was caught by Su Ming, and he immediately became honest and looked innocent. Park Genji was injured but didn't realize it. Instead, he stared at the crested ibis with a fiery expression and asked in a trembling voice, "Excuse me, where did you find this firebird?" "Stop the bleeding first." Su Ming casually touched a roll of gauze and threw it to Park Genji. He didn't know if there were bacteria on the long beak of the crested ibis and whether it might cause infection. "A little injury, it doesn't matter." Park Genji was completely unaware. "Mr. Su, this is very important to me." Su Ming glanced at his wound. The bite from the little crested ibis was no joke. The wound was almost to the bone. He didn't know how such a little guy could bite him so harshly. If he didn't bandage and treat it in time, he could kill him just because of the bleeding. A great life. Obviously, in Park Genji's view, the origin of the crested ibis may be more important than his life. "I met this little guy on the way here. His parents are probably dead. He can't hunt and has no home, so I took him on the road with me. Su Ming, go and bandage his wound. Find some anti-inflammatory and hemostatic medicine." The first sentence was said to Park Genji, and the latter sentence was said to Su Ming. Su Ming had just taken off the backpack from his back. Before he could find the hemostatic medicine, he suddenly raised his head and looked towards the woods not far away. His pupils narrowed slightly and he let out a low roar like a wild beast. "Who is it? Come out." Su Ming also noticed the movement in the forest. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 657. A strange fat man walked into the woods. He was a fat man who was at least 50 or 60 years old, with slightly gray hair. However, he wore a tight suit, which squeezed out the fat on his body. When he walked, his flesh trembled, which looked very funny. "Ninja." Su Ming was dumbfounded. In broad daylight, in the dense forest deep in the Kinling Mountains, an old fat man dressed as a ninja came out. What was going on? Sakata-kun. Seeing the old fat ninja, Park Genji was very surprised. He stood up slowly, and frowned his two thick eyebrows like ink. "Why are you here?" "Hello, Mr. Park Genji." The fat ninja bowed slightly. "I came to see you at the request of Mr. Park Yingming." As soon as the voice fell, 5 ninjas dressed like Sakata walked out of the woods, but these people were obviously more like real ninjas than this old fat man. They were short, skinny, and even looked a little hunchbacked. But their eyes were very sharp, like animals walking on tiptoe, arching their backs, ready to pounce on their prey at any time. "Yingming," Park Genji frowned, "didn't I tell him not to get involved in this aspect of the family? Why did he send you here? No, how did you find me?" As Park Genji spoke, his expression suddenly changed. Park Yingming didn't know the exact location where he entered the mountain. This place was dozens of kilometers away from the foot of the mountain. He and his group were all professionals, and they were engaged in a shady business. From entering the country until entering the mountain, they deliberately concealed their tracks all the way, especially the first dozen kilometers after entering the mountain. Because they were relatively close to the area where humans lived, Park Genji and his group paid special attention to hiding their tracks. Not to mention Sakata-kun, who has been running a dog meat shop in Korea, even professionals would find it difficult to track him. He knew that when Sakata was young, he was engaged in a special profession. Sakata-kun is a real ninja. Ninjas have many mysterious abilities that outsiders see. In ancient times, technology was not well developed, and rumors spread, resulting in the profession of ninja being very mysterious to ordinary people, with great magical powers and omnipotence, just like the ancient Chinese immortals and foreign superheroes. For example, killing people invisibly and taking people's souls. During the Edo period, a daimyo of Satsuma domain and the lord of Josu domain had a feud and sent 2 female ninjas, dressed as geishas, to sing in a tavern near the lord's mansion of Josu domain. Every day, there were crowds of spectators. Soon, the lord of Josu domain learned about these two artists with both beauty and art, and sent people to invite them to perform in the mansion. After the song was over, the lord of Josu domain was about to have a closer contact, but suddenly fell to the ground, twitching all over, foaming at the mouth, and then had a high fever for half a month, was unconscious, and talked nonsense, as if his soul was taken away by gods and ghosts, and finally died suddenly. There is a legend that these two geishas are ninjas who can take people's souls and kill people invisibly. In fact, this is the most common method of assassination by ninjas. Blowing arrows are poison needles, which are usually hidden in long instruments such as flutes. As long as they are blown, the tiny poison needles will be shot into the human body silently at a close distance. It is difficult to detect even at close range, and even the person who is hit does not know what is going on. In order to protect the safety of ninjas, many poison needles are made of special materials that can melt into the blood. Once stimulated by hot blood, they disappear without a trace, and melt into the blood together with the poison above. Because the wound is small, it is often impossible to find the wound. As for being unconscious for dozens of days and unconscious, the technology was backward at that time, and the medicine was also very difficult. They could not find the tiny wounds on the body and thought that the soul was taken away. In fact, this is not because the ninjas are highly skilled and have strong business capabilities. They deliberately let the victims suffer for dozens of days and die after being tortured. It is because the poisons in ancient times were too toxic. They were all plant poisons and animal poisons. They were completely different from the high-tech chemical poisons of today, which can kill hundreds of people, tens of thousands of people, or even a whole city with 1 gram. The toxicity was limited. In addition, the carrier of the poison needle was as thin as a cow's hair, and the poison applied on it was very little, so it would not kill people in a short time. The unlucky lord died of complications and various tossings in the end. In ancient times, poisoning people to death, in fact, at least half of the cases, the poison could not kill people, unless it was like Panjinli and forcing Wu Dalan to drink poison. In assassination, being able to poison people to death at one time was definitely a professional expert, a master among ninjas. Of course, in addition to having to learn the technique of blowing arrows, ninjas also had to practice musical instruments, which was also considered versatile. To make up as all kinds of people, there are more mysterious legends among the people, that ninjas are all people with thousands of faces, and no one has ever seen his true face. There are also legends that ninjas can fly and escape into water, which basically relies on a special hollow belt. When climbing over the city wall, it can be used as a stepping tool, and it can be used as a scabbard to hide soft swords and weapons. When hiding in the water, it can also be used as a snorkel. In short, ninjas are not gods or ghosts or superpowers. Simply put, ninjas are special combat killers and special combat spies who have been trained by special institutions and have skills and knowledge. This profession reached its peak during the Warring States period in Japan. During World War II, the militaristic Bushido thought was rampant, and this profession became active again. Some so-called ninjas joined the army, served the invaders, protected politicians, and carried out assassinations and espionage activities. Ninjas are divided into Jonin, Chunin, and Genin. Jonin, also known as Brain Trust Ninja, specializes in planning the overall combat steps, and Chunin is the commander of the actual combat, with outstanding skills and tactics. Genin, also known as Physical Ninja, is equivalent to Special Operations Forces and is the actual ninja fighting on the front line. Sakata's grandfather was a Chunin of the IGA school, who died in Korea. From then on, the Sakata family stayed in Korea and became family friends with the Park family. Park Genji knew Sakata's origins, but in modern society, everyone speaks with guns. Who would really take ninjas seriously? In the past, it was just a joke. But even if it was a real ninja, it would be difficult to track him down after he entered the mountains, unless these people always followed him. Sakata's strength is still unknown, but the other 6 ninjas are clearly good players. 1 Chunin and 5 Genin, in the jungle, both the ability to survive and the ability to kill are far better than those so-called poaching experts he hired. Thinking of this, Park Genji, who was used to the darkness of the world, subconsciously raised his hand slightly, slowly raised his hand behind his back, and touched the place where the pistol was inserted on his waist. Empty. Then he remembered that the gun had been disarmed by Su Ming. His eyes flashed and swept across Su Ming. Su Ming was also dumbfounded. Park Genji and the others spoke Korean, which Su Ming and Su Meng could not understand, but he was not blind, and he could still see clearly what was going on. The two sides obviously knew each other. Park Genji was very surprised at the arrival of the other party, and the 5 people on the other side, except for the fat ninja, all looked cold, as if they were afraid that others would not know that they were hostile. What the hell is going on? In broad daylight, a bunch of ninjas suddenly appeared. Obviously, this is not cosplay, no one would come to this ghost place to cosplay ninjas, and the old fat man really doesn't look like a ninja. Besides, when will it be the turn of ninjas to run rampant in China? Is there still justice? Will a flying sword fairy emerge from the mountains in a while, with a fire-breathing beast, summon forbidden spells and fight with these ninjas? This style is too weird. Su Ming put the crested ibis in his arms, only revealing a small red head, and shook his head at Su Meng, indicating that he should not be impulsive and wait and see. Obviously, these ninjas are not looking for him. Xiao Hong popped his head out and looked at the ninjas with the same curiosity. The crested ibis, which made Park Genji's heart flutter, did not seem to attract the attention of the ninjas. Most of the 6 people focused their attention on Park Genji, occasionally casting a glance at Su Ming and Su Meng. Park Genji's eyelids jumped slightly. "What exactly did Yingming call you here for?" Park Genji asked word by word in a hoarse voice. Sakata said calmly, "Mr. Park Genji, this is also for the little Cheolbin to grow up in the sunshine, and for the Park family to develop smoothly in the official business." Park Genji was stunned, and then he suddenly realized and laughed crazily, I understand, so my brother and uncle who are not in the light have dragged them down, so I must disappear. If I am not mistaken, I have been wanted in the country, right? No need to say more, Mr. Park Genji, I hope you will leave the world without pain. You commit suicide. These 5 are my last subordinates. I don't want them to be hurt. If you resist, I have to use drastic means. Sakata interrupted Park Genji coldly and nodded slightly. The moment he nodded, a ninja drew a strange short knife less than 2 feet long from his waist and looked at him coldly. Bang! Before the ninja made a move, Park Genji had already pounced like a leopard and punched the nearest ninja on the nose. Blood spurted everywhere, and the ninja groaned before falling down limply. One of his noses was almost completely flattened, and the fragments of the bridge of the nose jumped into his brain, killing him immediately. Park Genji held the limp body and pushed it hard towards the others. While the others were dodging, he fled in panic and rushed into the woods. Sakata-kun threw a cross mark in the air, which whistled in the air and stabbed into Park Genji's back. Park Genji cried out in pain, staggered forward, rolled over, and fell into the woods. Sakata-kun drew out his soft knife, glanced at Su Ming and Su Meng, and his eyes seemed to have regarded them as private persons. He said to the other people in a cold tone, "The 4 of you stay and kill them." After that, he held the knife himself, and his body was as flexible as a fat monkey. He rushed into the woods and chased after Park Genji, who was fleeing. The 4 ninjas who stayed behind drew their swords and formed a semicircle, then approached Su Ming and Su Meng with expressionless faces. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 658. Whether a person can survive often depends not on his own efforts but on the strength of his opponent. These Ryu ninjas are like this. In a modern society where ninjutsu has long been declining, being able to practice hard since childhood and never give up for 20 years to become a qualified ninja even in the heyday of the Japanese warring states, ninja requires great persistence, perseverance, and hard work that are beyond the imagination of ordinary people. If they choose to return to their country to teach disciples or choose to spread ninja culture, they may become a generation of masters, contemporary celebrities, and gain both fame and fortune. Unfortunately, they don't take the right path. Su Ming was a little dumbfounded. From beginning to end, he didn't understand a word of the conversation between the two sides. It was like watching a movie. Suddenly, a small knife was taken out, and suddenly a punch was killed. Suddenly, small darts were running around, and suddenly they were surrounded. It's none of my business. I'm just passing by. Su Ming shrugged speechlessly at the four black-clothed ninjas. The four ninjas stepped forward expressionlessly. One of them, who seemed to be the youngest, even showed a very villainous grin. Su Ming took a step back and spread his hands and waved them around. Don't come over here. I'll even beat myself when I get mad. The four ninjas obviously didn't understand what Su Ming said. Even if they did, it would be useless. Ninjas pay the most attention to obedience. As a dignified Ryu ninja with a 1,000-year heritage, even if they know they will die, they must do their best to complete the mission. Besides, the two people in front of them don't look difficult to kill. The big guy is nothing more than a little stronger. In front of the flexible Ryu ninjas, being strong is not an advantage. They like such enemies the most. Under the flexible skills and endless little magic weapons of the ninjas, the sturdy men in the eyes of ordinary people are nothing more than a meat pillar. As for the young pretty boy, he is nothing more than a little handsome. If being handsome is useful, why do you need 20 years of hard training? Why do you need a diploma, a house, and a car? Why do we need an agent? Ninjas are not so-called martial arts masters, they are killing machines, with many effective killing methods that have been passed down for many years. The Four Seasons formation of the IGA school is one of them. Four ninjas who work well together form a small encirclement formation, defend each other, and attack together. The power is definitely not as simple as the superposition of four people. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter, creation, residence, destruction, and emptiness. In spring, all things are born. In summer, the scorching sun. In autumn, depression and withering. In winter, killing and extinction. Using the Four Seasons formation to deal with a target, as long as the encirclement is formed, there is no record of failure in history. There are only a handful of people who can survive the fourth round of attack. The formation moved, and the ninja also moved. Creation, residence, destruction, and emptiness. Once the formation moved, it entered the Cheng character formula. The first knife came from the youngest ninja with a villain's grin. Because he was the youngest, he had the most momentum. Young people are always full of energy. Momentum is the concentrated embodiment of a person's determination and will, and it is a magical energy that can surpass the physical limits of the body. Since ancient times, I don't know how many weak people can defeat the strong, relying on momentum. Young people are full of energy, so they dare to think what ordinary people dare not think, and they often create miracles. The sword light is as magnificent as a waterfall, swiftly chasing after a meteor. The sword skills are fair and above board, but the sword momentum is like a sinister venomous snake, treacherous and unpredictable. The short sword originally attacked Su Ming upright, but suddenly changed direction in the middle, and the blade stabbed Su Ming's waist. No one expected that this young ninja who looked the most imposing was not reckless at all. Kill the most dangerous big guy first, and the remaining pretty boys can only be slaughtered. All the previous actions, expressions, and even the first half of this knife were to confuse the other party, making the other party think that the target of the attack was this pretty boy. The target of the attack would be panicked, while the other big man who looked like a bodyguard would focus on saving people and neglect his own defense. The young ninja believed that this knife would definitely succeed. The cold light flashed, the short knife disappeared in an instant, and the tip of the knife had already touched Su Meng's clothes. The young ninja seemed to have felt the smooth feeling of the blade piercing into the body and cutting through the human muscles. As soon as this knife came out, he no longer regarded Su Meng as a target, but looked at Su Meng. A person who was about to die was no longer worth being a target. The young swordsman's knife had not yet sent the enjoyable piercing into the liver, but his left face suddenly hurt slightly, his eyes were filled with blood red, and the world in front of him seemed to be washed by blood in an instant. Bang! At this time, he seemed to hear a muffled sound close to his ear, as if something hit his face. The eardrum broke instantly. He didn't even feel the pain, his vision went dark immediately, and he lost consciousness. A broken head hurts. But a person whose head exploded wouldn't feel anything. When Su Meng retracted his fist, the young swordsman still maintained his previous posture, facing Su Meng, holding a knife in one hand, stabbing Su Meng on the side. The tip of the knife was only half a centimeter away from Su Meng's waist. This half centimeter would never reach, because his revelation, like a watermelon that was thrown hard on the concrete floor from the 18th floor, exploded. He almost had no head, and blood was like a chaotic mountain spring, gushing out of his cavity in all directions. Young people with strong energy can indeed create miracles, but more often, they will die under their own ignorance and arrogance. Although the young ninja created the illusion of attacking Su Meng, for the real target, Su Meng, he took half a step forward, left the attack circle of the other three people, and approached Su Meng. Su Meng didn't see his true intention, but he had a keen fighting intuition like a beast. No matter who this guy's target is, since you are closest to me, I will kill you first. A dead person cannot target anyone, it's that simple. In order to make a contribution, the young ninja took an extra half step forward, risking his own life under Su Meng's fist, and at the same time destroying this almost perfect four-season formation. When a bud sprouts in spring, it does not receive enough rain and sunshine. Its foundation is damaged and its development is stunted. How can it hope to grow into a fruitful ear of rice? With the death of the young ninja, the four seasons formation, living and bad Kong, has not yet fully matured, and has directly entered the final stage of Kong. The formation is broken. But people are still there. The remaining three ninjas were indeed well trained, and did not hesitate at all because of the death of their companions. On the contrary, they did not hesitate to fight alone and rushed forward. This time, the three of them attacked Su Meng. Su Meng is the real target. Su Meng's almost violent punch like a cannonball made them realize that this big man was definitely not a brute force. On the contrary, if the three of them join forces, they may not be each other's opponents. The only chance now is to kill this seemingly weak pretty boy. This pretty boy is obviously the boss of the big man. Once he is really in danger, the big man must protect him. That's when the big guy showed his flaws. It is also their only chance to win or survive. The three of them staggered their steps and attacked Su Meng from different directions. Su Meng's arms were slender, and with one step, he could take 2 steps as much as an ordinary person. The three ninjas chose different directions of attack just so that Su Meng could take care of him without any rush. The ninja who was closest to Su Meng had a flash of determination in his eyes and stabbed Su Meng in the chest with a knife. From the first day they become ninjas, they will continue to receive a lesson. In order to achieve their goals, they can sacrifice everything. Being the closest to Su Meng means that he will definitely die. But as long as he can use his life to create a chance for the other two companions, his death is valuable, and he must die. Without hesitation, he went to die without hesitation. So he died. He was kicked in the waist by Su Meng. His thin body was like a piece of paper, suddenly folded in half, and then bounced away. The man was dead in mid-air, and his body was like a rag, hanging on the treetops, floating. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Count the cold stars, tear the air apart, and fly towards Su Ming's face with a roar. At close range, these strangely shaped, aerodynamic darts are thrown with a ninja's professional skills, and are as powerful as pistol bullets. Even if Su Ming was twice as fast, he still wouldn't be able to catch up. Even if he can block it, he can only rely on his flesh and blood. Flesh and blood cannot stop these darts. Shameless magic. Su Ming roared, and a transparent mental shield suddenly appeared on his face. Two transformed energy storage balls are activated at the same time. The moment several darts hit Su Ming's face, they suddenly stopped as if they were stuck in a quagmire. Time seems to have stood still. The dart and its sharp end were at a distance from Su Ming's face that was imperceptible to the naked eye. The 6 darts seemed to be inserted into Su Ming's face, but they could not penetrate even a little bit. Shameless magic, a layer of rhinoceros skin transforms into an energy storage ball, and a layer of armadillo bone transforms into an energy storage ball. In terms of thick skin, Su Ming at this time is definitely the thickest person in the world. Even real pistol bullets can't do anything, let alone darts that directly chase pistol bullets. Although ninjas have a will of steel, they are still humans after all. When faced with unnatural phenomena, the guy who fired the darts temporarily lost his mind. As a result, his chest came into close contact with Su Ming's fist, and a hole was dented. As the rabbit rose and the falcon fell, only one of the 3 ninjas who were attacking Su Ming remained. But the reality is not words. Text descriptions can describe the ninjas attacking from 3 directions separately. In fact, the actions of the 3 people happened completely at the same time. Therefore, the 3rd ninja's knife had already stabbed Su Ming's chest. He jumped high like a big bird, holding a knife in both hands in the air, with the tip of the knife pointed right at Su Ming's heart. This sword, together with the inertia of the ninja's leap, the weight of the body, the strength and skill of holding the sword with both arms, it is impossible for Su Ming to block it even if he is covered with a thin steel plate. Ninja swords are not commercial products that can be bought everywhere. They are all made by skilled craftsmen. The swords passed down from generation to generation, some even have hundreds of years of history. It may be an exaggeration to cut gold and jade, but the sharpness is absolutely unquestionable. A tiger roar transformed energy storage ball was opened. Get out, Su Ming's eyes widened and he roared. Tigers roar and dragons roar. The fierce tiger occupied the mountain forest, and with a roar, all the beasts surrendered. Tigers are not the most powerful among all beasts in combat. Lions are not weaker than tigers, such as elephants, giant crocodiles, etc., and are even stronger than tigers. However, the tiger is the undisputed king of beasts. Because it is born with the aura of a king, under the roar of the tiger, all beasts are afraid. Su Ming had learned tiger roars from tigers in the zoo before, but his voice was hoarse. He only learned the appearance of a tiger roar. It sounded very similar, but it was far from being similar in spirit. It had no momentum of a tiger roar at all. Except for being a little louder, it could hardly scare anyone. Due to the different organ structures, humans can never truly learn to roar a tiger. But the energy storage ball can. A tiger roar. Due to the high mental tension, a black word king even flashed faintly on Su Ming's forehead. The ninja was in mid-air, and the short knife in his hand had already stabbed Su Ming's chest. He could even feel a slight obstruction from the handle of the knife. With just a little more force, he could pierce the chest of the person in front of him. A meaningless Chinese word suddenly rang in his ears. The voice was low and powerful, not particularly loud, but it was like a sledgehammer, smashing into his body layer by layer. The first time, the eardrums vibrated, and the head was dizzy. The second time, the heart beat wildly, and the blood rushed. The third time, the liver and gallbladder trembled, and the hands and feet were numb. The knife was in his hand, and the man was in the air, but he had lost control of his body, and a deep fear from the bottom of his heart filled his body. He seemed to feel that the person in front of him was not a human being at all, but a giant beast from ancient times, which could swallow him up at any time. Faced with this irresistible force, the well-trained ninja did not even think of resisting, and even did not think of begging for mercy. Submission, only submission, instinctive, unhesitating submission. The ninja lost his soul with the power of a roar. The tip of the knife stopped on Su Ming's chest, and then fell vertically downwards with this ninja. But this fear only lasted for a moment. No matter how powerful the tiger was, it was impossible to make a human being afraid for a lifetime just by shouting. It couldn't even last for a second. After a brief moment of distraction, the ninja gritted his teeth and stabbed Su Ming's abdomen fiercely. But the tip of the knife only penetrated the clothes and could not move forward any further, as if it was stuck on an iron plate. A light cry. A white shadow jumped out of Su Ming's arms, and there was a dazzling red on the top of the white shadow. In less than a second, the ninja lost consciousness and fell, and the place where he stabbed was exactly where Su Ming stuffed Xiaohong in. This knife just stabbed Xiaohong's beak. This really pissed Xiaohong off. Xiaohong, a little guy who can't even catch fish, a weak animal that even little foxes are afraid of, but when facing humans, he is not afraid at all. Xiaohong's long beak pecked fiercely on the short knife. With a crisp sound, the fine steel short knife that has been passed down for 100 years was pecked with a small hole. Immediately afterwards, the red shadow flashed, and Xiaohong had already landed on the top of the ninja's head, and suddenly lowered his head and pecked at his top door. The strongest human skull was as fragile as a piece of tofu in front of Xiaohong's bird beak. With a puff, a deep hole was opened on the ninja's head, and most of the half-foot-long bird beak was immersed in it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 659. The four ninjas died in different ways. In terms of tragedy, the guy who had a hole in his head opened by the ibis was not the worst. At least compared to the first young ninja, most of his head was still there. What was even worse than being brainless was that a poacher from the last time he entered the mountain was brought alive by Su Ming and inserted into the ground like a tree. All in all, Su Ming was not a novice who had seen miserable situations, but when he saw the small hole in the head of the last ninja, he couldn't help but shudder. Because it was killed by the crested ibis. The crested ibis raised its head and pulled out its long beak from the small hole on the ninja's head, bringing out red and white streaks of blood. A lot of blood foam immediately poured out of the small hole on the head. Xiaohong shook her head, and her long beak spilled a bead of blood on the ground. It's disgusting. Go and wash yourself in the river next to it. Su Ming frowned, and like a big duck, Xiaohong, the ibis, twisted her butt and ran to the river to wash her mouth and brush her teeth. The ninja's short sword fell on the edge. There was a small hole in the 100 refined steel blade that almost penetrated. Su Ming picked up the knife and knocked it on the stone. Sparks flew everywhere and a corner of the pebble fell off. However, there was not a single scratch on the dagger. The dagger is made of strong material and can cause such serious damage, which shows how hard the crested ibis Xiaohong's beak must be. And skulls. The human skull is the hardest bone in the body, and Xiaohong easily opened a hole in it. Waterfowl hunt with a long beak. The beak is not only a tool for hunting and eating, but also a weapon. It is natural that it should be hard and sharp, but I have never heard of it being able to reach this level. Besides, no bird would take the initiative to kill someone. It's not hunting. Is this still a crested ibis? Oh. I almost forgot about that guy. Su Ming was thinking about the problem of the crested ibis, and suddenly he remembered that the two people who had just entered the forest were still chasing each other. Deep in the dense forest, Park Genji was covered in blood. His camouflage uniform was torn open and hung like tattered strips of cloth. He was panting and leaning against a big tree, watching the movements around him warily. He was still holding a sharp-edged granite stone tightly in his hand. The sharp corners on the stone were stained with blood. It seemed that this was his only weapon. After a while, the fat ninja Sakata-kun appeared in front of him. Compared to Park Genji's embarrassment, Sakata-kun clearly had the upper hand. There was only a small wound on his head, and the blood stained his gray hair red. Other than that, there were no other scars. Mr. Park Genji, there is no need to resist anymore. For ordinary people, your skills are very good. But I am a ninja of Ryu after all. Mr. Sakata walked to a place more than 1 meter in front of Park Genji and stopped. He threw a sharpened dart and landed at Park's feet. He bowed slightly and said calmly, "Please help Mr. Park Yingming and commit suicide, there will be no pain." Park Genji slowly picked up the dart. The dart had a sharp edge. In the sunlight filtering through the leaves, the edge reflected a faint blue light. It was obviously highly poisonous. Just one stroke on the neck and it's over. Park Genji is not afraid of death. From the moment he entered this industry, he knew that sooner or later such a day would come. Every day he passed was a profit for him. But he never expected that he would die in the hands of his beloved brother. His younger brother wanted to kill him. In addition to being sad, Park Genji was even more angry. If a person can kill even the people closest to him, what bottom line can such a person have? Maybe his purpose this time sounds reasonable, but once he gets used to having no bottom line, the entire family will be led into an abyss of eternal destruction by him in the future. Park Genji is the elder brother and the patriarch of this small family. While considering the relationship between brothers, he is also responsible for maintaining the entire family. If Park Youngmyeong is ineffective, then let someone else manage the family. Even if a disabled little Jibin manages the family business, it is better than a crazy and ignorant person. Sakata-kun, Park Genji suddenly shouted as if he had made some important discovery. Sakata was slightly stunned, and Park Genji did not hesitate to throw the poison dart at Sakata with all his strength. The poison darts can also cause fatal damage to Sakata. Okay, Mr. Park Genji, my patience has its limits. Sakata raised his hand casually and caught the dart with 3 fingers. His fat body jumped like a pinball and landed in front of Park Genji. Park Genji punched out, but Sakata did not dodge. He easily used his arms to remove the force from Park Genji's fist, used the force to spin Park Genji in a circle, raised his foot and kicked the opponent's knee, and Park Genji knelt down in front of him. Sakata shook his hand, and a thin steel wire hung down from his fingertips. A section of the steel wire was tied to an iron ring on his finger. There was a small steel ball at the other end, and the steel wire was wrapped around Park Genji's neck. Fell into Sakata's other hand. He exerted a little force with his hands, and the thin steel wire was deeply strangled into Park Genji's neck. Park Genji's eyes widened, and he tried desperately to break free of the steel wire around his neck with both hands, but he couldn't pull it, and instead put his hand on it. The blood dripped from the strangulation, and the steel wire sank deeply into his finger bones and continued to tighten. Yinhong's blood oozed out from several fingers and his neck. "Stop struggling, Mr. Park Genji." Sakata-kun had a blank expression on his face, and he increased his strength on his hands, saying to himself, "Ninja killing is an art, please enjoy this art, you are a noble person, there is no need to fear death like those poor people at the bottom." Su Ming happened to come from behind with Su Meng and Xiao Hong. Originally, these two gangs had nothing to do with him, and they were not good people. They fought and died without caring about Su Ming. Sakata made a mistake. He shouldn't have left the 4 ninjas to kill and silence them, forcing Su Ming, who was barely neutral, to the side of Park Genji. And one of them was a ninja, which further shifted Su Ming's original neutral position. Compared with Korean poachers, it is obvious that the little Japanese ninjas are more annoying. Chinese people have a natural dislike for Japan. After all, this is not entirely due to the war. Since ancient times, there have been many countries and nations that have fought with China, not just Japan. But if it comes to national hatred and family feuds, Japan is the first to bear the brunt. It has something to do with the character traits of this nation. When Su Ming felt it, he saw Sakata talking about the art of killing with an intoxicated look on his face. He felt sick and had goosebumps. Old pervert. After being defeated for decades, a few ninjas actually had the nerve to come to the heartland of China to show off the art of killing. Isn't this courting death? I don't understand the art of killing, I just want to smash your head. Without thinking, Su Ming picked up a fist-sized stone and smashed it at the back of Sakata's head. Sakata reacted quickly. Hearing the wind behind his head, he tilted his head subconsciously, and the stone flew past his ear. Baga, Sakata was furious. His expression of intoxication with art just now changed instantly, and he turned into a ferocious look. While strangling Park Genji's neck, he turned his head and looked at the side viciously. What greeted him was a fist. As soon as he turned around, a rough fist appeared in his sight, getting bigger and bigger, and occupied his entire field of vision in the blink of an eye. Park Genji's neck suddenly loosened, and the long-lost air poured back into his body. He didn't know what happened at all. He knelt on the ground, instinctively breathing in big gulps of fresh air, and coughed violently. Sakata's bloody body fell to the ground. It was probably a reflex of the central nervous system. The dead Sakata's hands and feet twitched slightly from time to time. Cough, 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 cough. Park Genji coughed with blood foam all over his mouth, and finally calmed down his breathing. After seeing the situation clearly, he stood up with the help of the tree and bowed deeply to Su Ming. "Thank you for saving me for the second time." Su Ming stared at Park Genji for a while, and said lightly, "If you really want to thank me, then tell me what happened. I don't want to be deceived after saving people." Park Genji was silent for a moment, and finally started talking to Su Ming in fluent Chinese. Nephew's illness, family feuds, ancestral legends. At the same time, Su Ming solved a mystery. It turned out that the poachers on the other side who met Su Ming were hired by Park Genji through channels to find the so-called elixir of immortality. "Mr. Su, I still can't tell you what my job is, because it will cause trouble for you," Park Genji finally said. Su Ming nodded. "Some things need to be explained, and some things can be tacitly understood. What are you going to do next?" Su Ming touched the head of the red-crowned crane Xiaohong and asked Park Genji. Park Genji glanced at the three-legged red-crowned crane and said, "I used to think that the family legend was false, but now it seems that it is not groundless. At least the three-legged firebird does exist. Maybe it's just a sick red-crowned crane with bone hyperplasia," Su Ming said. The little red-crowned crane shook his head, obviously not satisfied with this low-end evaluation. Park Genji smiled helplessly. "Maybe, after all, it's just a legend. Although I found the three-legged bird, I didn't find the so-called elixir of immortality." "Immortality," Su Ming shrugged, "where is such a thing in the world?" Park Genji sighed, a little discouraged. "Mr. Su, I want to go back to Korea to deal with some disputes within the family. In addition, I have an unwelcome request. I hope you can agree." Su Ming frowned slightly. Neither of these two parties is a good person. They don't care about him after the fight. Although he saved Park Genji, he is not prepared to have too much interaction with him. "It's about my nephew." Park Genji gritted his teeth and said, "Legend has it that the firebird and the elixir of life appeared at the same time, and this firebird is still young. If it grows up and finds the elixir of life in the future, can you please help my nephew Park Jibin? The child is innocent." Su Ming thought for a moment and said, "I can't promise you anything. I can only say that if there is such a thing and the conditions allow, I will consider it. It's enough to get your kindness. Park Genji bowed deeply, then I'll take my leave. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 660. Ninjas are also human beings, and they also have to eat, drink, and sleep. When the 5 ninjas went into the mountains, they actually brought a lot of equipment, food, and even money with them. Each of them carried a large package behind them, which could hold things can also be used as shields. Park Genji searched out all the belongings of the ninjas, selected the ones that could be used, packed a small bag and carried it behind his back. These supplies were enough for him to walk out of the Kinling Mountains and return to South Korea through his own channels. Mr. Su, I'm taking my leave. Please take care of yourself. Before leaving, Park Genji once bowed deeply to Su Ming. He is a poacher and a bad guy in the eyes of the law, but he is not a villain or a villain. When Su Ming met him, he did not hinder him from the beginning to the end. Instead, he saved him twice, and even made a promise that was not a promise. If there is a longevity medicine in the future, if conditions permit, consider helping his nephew. You must know that the object of this promise is the legendary elixir of longevity. If there is such a thing, no amount will be too much, and no matter how rich you are, you will not be willing to give it to others. After meeting by chance, Park Genji had nothing to say to Su Ming, only gratitude for being able to do this. Moreover, there is an indescribable aura between people. When some people meet for the first time, without even saying a few words, they become bored with each other for no reason and wish to stay away from each other. Some people feel like old friends at the first sight. With just one movement of his eyes, there is a feeling of closeness, like seeing him again after a long absence, as if he has been familiar with each other before. Park Genji had a very good impression of Su Ming. If the situation was different, maybe he would treat Su Ming to a nice drink and maybe they would become good friends. Su Ming's impression of Park Genji wasn't bad either. This man was calm, decisive, and had some rare sincerity, which were all attractive qualities. But it's not particularly good. Because of his father and being a friend of animals, Su Ming had a natural hostility towards poachers. Park Genji was still a poacher no matter what, so it was difficult for Su Ming to really get close to him. So even though he knew that something serious might happen if Park Genji returned to China, Su Ming was not prepared to get involved in Park Genji's family affairs. Wait a minute, Mr. Park Genji, do you recognize this? Su Ming took out a dog tag from his arms. There is an 8-digit number engraved on the front of the dog tag, and there is a small strange pattern on the back. I can't tell what it is. It looks like a plant, some kind of animal, and a bit like the sun at first glance. It looks like it gives people a weird feeling. This was what he found on the bodies of the poachers who were with Park Genji. This wasn't the first time he'd seen such dog tags. I just came to the zoo. When I went into the mountain for the first time, I met the 7 poachers. The leading male poacher with eyes had the same brand on his body, but the number was different. When I went to Bamboo Town, Sulajun scented one of the animal cages had this emblem printed on it. Antonio's 2 professional bodyguards who were sucked to death by bats also had 2 dog tags on them. The shapes and numbers were different from the current ones, but they were engraved with same emblem. The so-called dog tag is a small metal tag used to identify one's identity. It first appeared in the army. It is engraved with the personal information of soldiers. On the battlefield, shells are flying everywhere, and a person may not even have a complete corpse left. Dog tags for identification. These few times I have noticed that there are strange emblems on the signs. This kind of emblem is very rare, it can't be a coincidence. What about this? Park Genji took the sign and took one look at it, then said, "Oh, this is the emblem of God's garden." God's garden? What is it? Su Ming asked with a frown. an extreme human chauvinistic organization that promotes the theory of human supremacy, promotes hierarchy, and divides people into 3, 6, or 9 grades. The core idea is somewhat similar to fascism. It believes that all living things in the world should become slaves of humans, and lower humans should become slaves of higher humans. It is said that this organization has been studying the science of human evolution through genetic technology, hoping to find the path and mystery of human evolution. The leader of the organization believes that the world is God's back garden, and they are the messengers of the garden. In short, they are messengers of God. Demigods Park Genji was grateful for Su Ming's life-saving efforts and spoke in great detail, pouring out everything he knew. "That's not a cult." Su Ming frowned, thinking that I am still the true apostle of Vulcan, the only one. If we go back 1,000 or 2,000 years, God may not be as influential as the god of fire. What's going on? Are good human beings tired of being crooked and insisting on becoming gods? That's not true. I personally think it's just a boring game played by a group of rich people. These people can't find any other excitement and can only imagine that they are the masters of mankind. Park Genji smiled. Of course, God's garden is very powerful and has many professional mercenaries and poachers, who have great influence in the Western underground world. As long as you have money, you can hire their people through channels. Park Genji hired poachers from the Garden of God twice, which cost a lot of money. And Antonio's 2 bodyguards are probably also people from the Garden of God. Where is the headquarters of this so-called garden? Do you know more details? Su Ming asked. Park Genji shook his head. This is a very loose organization, and it is also very mysterious. It is said that the leaders have their own businesses all over the world, not a specific company. I am just someone who can hire them through channels. As for the headquarters, Mr. Su, in this era, there is no need for a headquarters. Through encrypted video calls, several leaders can hold meetings at any time even if they are scattered all over the world. As he spoke, his expression suddenly became serious. Are you going to deal with God's garden? I suggest you don't think so. Although the leaders of God's garden are very mysterious, one thing is certain, they are indeed a top group of people in human society. Some are rich enough to rival a country, and some are political leaders. Yes, some may be warlords or top scientists. This is definitely not something that one person can contend with. It requires not only a huge amount of wealth, but also the support of multiple governments. In the West, they can even secretly manipulate some small countries. Su Ming laughed and waved to interrupt Park Genji. No, 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 I'm just curious. I'm just a small businessman in China. I'm not interested in dealing with God. That's Satan's job. Even if Satan can't do it, there are still gods and Buddhas in the sky. It's not my turn as a small human to worry about it. Park Genji was stunned, and then he smiled and stretched out his hand. Goodbye then. Su Ming hesitated for a moment, but still stretched out his hand and shook it vigorously with Park Genji. A big, calloused, powerful hand. Park Genji left, and Su Ming continued to move forward into the mountains. God's garden, Su Ming's eyes gradually narrowed, revealing a dangerous light. It turns out that the organization that killed his father is called God's Garden. At least it is related to God's garden. The death of his father left only one clue, which was the dog tag of a poacher on the other side. Even his mother only saw the tag once. When he was a child, his mother didn't want to talk to Su Ming about this matter. First, it was sad to mention it, and the scene was emotional. Second, Su's mother didn't want Su Ming to grow up with hatred, especially a hatred that he didn't know how to take. Hatred is a double-edged sword. It may hurt the other party, but the first thing that will be hurt is definitely his own heart. As a mother, Su's mother only hopes that Su Ming can grow up healthy and sunny. However, as a son and the blood inheritor of his father, Su Ming has never forgotten that his father did not die a normal death. he was shot by a group of vicious criminals. It is said that a total of 13 bullets were taken out of his father's body. When Su Ming was a child, he didn't know how to take revenge, nor did he know who to take revenge on. He just reminded himself more than once in his heart to always remember this hatred. Maybe he can't take revenge, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. From childhood to adulthood, he only knew a few details about the events of that year. The last time he went to Sunzan, he had a deep talk with his mother. As her son grew up, he became capable and responsible. Mother Su told Su Ming some details of the year, including the pattern on the dog tag left by the poachers. From Park Genji, Su Ming finally learned the name of this organization, God's Garden. Very good. When God controlled humans, he also gave humans a channel to touch God. I'm not afraid of your mystery. As long as I know your existence, I can find you through clues sooner or later. Of course, it's definitely not the time now. As Park Genji said, this organization is too powerful. Maybe any giant can completely suppress Su Ming. But Su Ming is not in a hurry. He is still young. Only 1 year after graduation, with the ability of animal friends and his own brains, he created his current career. Not only did he have good economic gains, he also had a good reputation among the people, and even obtained some support from 2 major countries. Time is always on the side of young people. As long as they are given enough time, they are fully capable of creating miracles. Continuously expand your financial empire, strengthen the various forces at hand, and obtain support from all sides. When you have enough strength, Su Ming will have a good talk with those people in God's heaven. The little crested ibis seemed to feel the fluctuations in Su Ming's mood, twisting restlessly in his arms, and making a long cry. Su Ming pinched its long beak like a steel cone. The little crested ibis turned its head hard in dissatisfaction, trying to avoid Su Ming's hand, but unfortunately it was not as strong as Su Ming, and its mouth was pinched, so it could only make a depressed gurgling sound from its stomach. Su Ming laughed, "Don't worry, you and I are just a little guy, now we are too young, and when we grow up, sooner or later, we will surprise everyone." Before others were surprised, Su Ming was surprised when he found the pandas. Damn, who showed the World of Warcraft promotional video to the pandas?